welcome to Real Talk with the Gile Group, our podcast. I don't even know what number it is.
But it's number 5. Actually.
Is it number 5?
Yep.
All right, it's
Yep.
number 5. You are the numbers guy after all. Today, I wanted to just take a few minutes and talk about sellers and kind of a couple of things that I would suggest to our sellers and a little bit about how we work with sellers. So when I sit down with a seller, Tom and I typically will go together to the listing appointment, or if one of our agents has a referral for a listing, I would go with that agent and sit down with the seller. But we can also do that virtually. So I can do in person or I can do it virtually. And that was something that I recently wrapped my head around. We do a lot of our buyer, if not all of our buyer.
Yeah, probably almost all of them anymore are virtual.
Are virtual.
Yep.
When we originally talked to the buyer and we walked through the process and going to our coaching retreat, I had that epiphany. A coach had mentioned that she did all of her listings virtually. And I was like, okay, but
I'm like, how does
that work? I just wanted to ask a couple of logistic questions because I could imagine how that would work and do it on a Zoom call. So one of the things that we talk about when we're first meeting with the seller is how to prep the house, how to make it look its best, and what to focus on. Not so much remodeling or new carpet or make this pretty. That's certainly something that we discuss and we talk about. But one of the things that I think is most important is repairs. I think being proactive, rather than reactive, serves the seller better. Even in a crazy busy market like we're seeing right now, I think that a seller, when I sit down with them, I suggest that we do a pre-list inspection. A home inspection before we list. The reason I do that is because, and we have buyers who are coming in saying, we're not going to ask for repairs, or we're only going to ask for repairs under a certain dollar amount. Things like that, as we know. But as a seller, we also know that the buyer, if something is found in an inspection, and when was the last time you personally were in our crawl space?
Yeah.
We don't know. There's oftentimes leaks that we don't know about. Radon, we've had our home tested for radon and it was okay, but that can change over time. So the bottom line to that is, to me, a seller we don't really always know what's happening with our house. So a pre-list inspection will give us that information and put the seller in the best position to go, okay, this is something that obviously we should probably address, a big bones item.
Yeah, he can see exactly.
Not necessarily dollar big, but just an item that, we're going to get that cleared up because, first of all, we want our house to look good and have a clean inspection. And to say, we're going to fix this, this, and this. And there's always little things that a buyer's just going to have to take on. And so that's where I think that that's some money well spent for $500 to be able to get your house inspected, have a list of the things that you might want to address as a seller. Pre-list, we do have to disclose it.
Okay, I was going to ask this. I mean, you talk to people all the time about it, and some people will say, yeah, it's a great idea, I want to do it, and some don't. So what are their... And you have some concerns. I mean,
some sellers are like, well, don't I have to tell them? Yes, we have to tell them. And frankly, if I know of a material defect on the house, I have to disclose it. Yeah. There's no reason to not disclose it, in my opinion. An inspection's going to happen. An inspector's going to find it. Inspectors will find trip hazards, one of my favorites. Strap the water heater, a double tap in an electrical panel, which needs to be addressed. But it doesn't necessarily, a buyer could take that on. That's not a huge expense. It's an easy thing to have that electrician come in and do that. Yeah. So there's little things, and we walk through with the seller and say, what do you want to address? And I'm going to counsel, it's bones things, electrical. If you have a plumbing leak, you want to address that for yourself because it's your home still, and for a future buyer. Right. It just, to me, makes sense. Yeah. If you don't want to disclose it, it's going to be found out anyway.
Exactly. It's not like you're going to be able to keep a secret. It's just the inspector's going to find it.
And if the buyer comes in and they do their home inspection, we don't do a pre-list home inspection. And now that home inspection, if that buyer decides to walk away or that sale fails or we won't do a repair and the buyer walks, that now becomes a part of your disclosure. So any inspection that happens is going to have to be disclosed. Right. So why not get in front of it? Yep. I like to be proactive rather than reactive. We can do it either way. It is totally the seller's choice. It's just a suggestion that I make when we're working with sellers.
So I'm intrigued. I'm going to go back a little bit. So you're talking about these virtual listing appointments.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well,
I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it.
I know.
You were...
Well, I did too.
Yeah, I know. We haven't even really discussed it that much.
No.
So I'm curious about...
Because... Yeah. So when we sit down, when we do a buyer presentation, we have a slide presentation that we go through and we walk through all the points. Well, same thing happens when I do a listing presentation. So that piece of it was really easy for me to see that going virtual. Yeah. Not a problem. We walk through what we do to market and what we do to prepare and, pictures and flyers and, all staging, all of the things. That's easy. I can do that. But my thing was, how am I going to know the condition, the improvements? And so that can be walked through virtually. The seller could do that on the phone. And if they're more comfortable, we are in a different world as far as people coming into homes, and we have ways to make sure that the COVID, rules are followed and things like that. So, and honestly, a little bit of the COVID piece and doing things online is that now the seller doesn't have to worry that half an hour before they got to get home or rush home. We can literally I don't care if you're in your pajamas. And I never care. Sellers are always like, oh, sorry, my house is a mess. I don't care. I'm not buying the house. I'm looking past the dishes in the sink that we all have, that I have right this minute in my kitchen. That's not a problem. So they can walk me through on the Zoom itself. They can also send me pictures. I can ask to see specific things. I can get a list of improvements, which I do anyway when I meet them in person. I make notes of all of those things, and I'll still make notes of those things virtually.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Am I missing anything?
No, I don't think it makes sense. Yeah, as long as they're walking you through the house, you're doing a Zoom or something, you can see the stuff. Because that's the big piece when we're there. It's like we walk through the house, we look at, checking things out.
Yeah. I thought it was brilliant. And I thought, well, it's an option. I'll do in person or I can do virtual either way. We can absolutely make it work. And for time, purposes, I think it's great to be able to do it virtually.
Yeah, that makes a lot. Well, yeah, because we've done that so much, like you said before, with the buyers, and that's almost all virtual.
Yes. Anyway. Our initial consultation with the buyers, is pretty much all virtual. It just works great. Yeah. I think it works awesome. So I think that's a good thing. So with the selling, just making sure we do that pre-list and then even pricing it correctly and buyers being ready to be under contract and buyers ready to purchase.
That's a good point. And then, buyers have been, gosh, the last, 12, 18 months, buyers have been kind of taking a beating. It's been tough. it's tough. And we hear a lot of, it's a seller's market. It's a seller's market. And the sellers are definitely in a position where they're able to dictate.
Yeah. Well, we also hear, I want to wait. I'm going to wait. I'm going to hold off, and I'm not going to buy because I'm going to wait till the market comes down.
Right. I'm trying to remember if it's come down. I don't think it has.
No, I don't think it has. And I don't think it's predicted to.
No, and it's not. So actually, part of it's kind of mindset too on a buyer's market versus seller's market. Yes, the sellers have been able to holding a pretty strong position, but the buyers too. If they look at kind of this thing of waiting, buying 2 years ago, we had a lot of buyers on the fence 2 years ago. Oh, I'm going to wait. When you bought 2 years ago, you just made 15-18% on your money. In 2 years.
If not more.
So the win really was to the buyer in buying now, in locking in that today's price and today's interest rates. I know we've been talking about this a lot, but
and interest rates going up and changing, and they're always going to change. But
it's just
this is the low.
This is the low. This is next year's low.
Yes.
Right. This is next year's low market.
Very much so.
Much so. That's really
Yeah.
It's something as buyers you got to, as a buyer's agent, you got to steel yourself for it. But this is really it is. It's just you got to keep that in mind because this is next year's low.
Yeah. So. Well, and we talked about with the seller piece doing a pre-inspection and making a smooth transaction for the seller and the buyer, because buyers are, I don't want to say giving up a lot, but they're what's the word I'm looking for? allowing for lots of things to be happening, no repairs and appraisal guarantees and, things like that. And I think that in doing the pre-inspection, we also have to be advising our buyers. Like I had a buyer consultation the other day, and they are a young couple, first-time home buyers, and so their price point is a first-time home buyer price point, and they're looking at condos and townhomes. And so we had the conversation about HOAs and how important the HOA is. They wanted to stay in a certain dollar amount with the HOA, and you always have a good line with the to me, a good explanation about the HOA, because people are like, oh my gosh, the HOAs are astronomical, which yes, they can be, but if they're too low, that can be a concern too.
There's a reason for an HOA. An HOA,
there is a reason.
There is. An HOA serves a purpose. And the HOA is actually going to also offset some of the expenses that as an owner you would do.
Yes,
because
a lot of times
cover, and it's going to depend on the HOA, and every HOA is different. And that's what I tell all my buyers, and I know you do the same thing. Every HOA is different. We need to do our due diligence on what is covered and what is not. But you may not have to worry about painting the exterior of the house or putting new siding on or putting on a roof, because that's covered by the HOA. Some cases it's not covered by the HOA. So it's super important to understand what's covered by the HOA and what's not. Sometimes what looks like a deal, and you got that $50 or $100 a month HOA, it's not really a deal because they're not really covering much. So you need to,
if it's an attached or a townhouse property, they may not cover, like you said,
so
the bigger items.
That and understand it's a super important part of the transaction is understanding things like reserve study. That's one of the biggest things that I it's ultimately the buyer's responsibility to look at, but those are one of the really important things to understand is how well funded is the HOA, and have they looked at and have they planned to make maintenance on the facility in the future. Well,
that's what a reserve study is for. So when the buyer, I explained to my buyers the other day, when we write not a transaction, when we write a sales agreement, we will ask for all of those HOA documents, and in there would be a reserve study. And the reserve study is basically a report that takes the repairs that are upcoming, the more higher end repairs, pavements, driveways, roofs, siding, if the HOA covers those, and goes windows, decks, go on and on. It basically goes out, I think they go out 5 years first, or do they go imminent 1 year? I can't remember. I've seen lots of them.
I have too, and I can't remember the first time, but
it just basically takes it out 3, 5, 10 years of what those big expenses
I've seen them
are.
go out 20 years.
Yes. And what those big expenses are, and then analyze. It reports what they have in their bank account, what they have in there for reserves, and that is helpful in understanding in 3 years we have to do a major repair. Do we have enough finances, or could there potentially be an assessment given to the homeowners within the condo? Each person who owns a condo would have an assessment done against them.
I was just going to say something about that, because that might be one of these. Oh, great! It's got a low HOA. I'm only paying $150 a month. Well, great! Now you just got slapped with a $15,000 assessment. Yeah. You would have been better off in an HOA that was properly planned for these repairs, and you paid $300 a month instead of getting hit with this big thing you got to pay for.
And we're here to help guide you. We're here to make sure that you get those documents. But the most important thing for a buyer is that it is buyer's responsibility to do due diligence, to read through those documents. And then there's 3 different ways that a buyer can make sure that they're get some assistance, because they certainly don't do this every day, but we're not lawyers and we're not HOA specialists, but we will get those documents for you. We will say, hey, you might want to make sure you pay attention to this, get this to the lawyer. So we can refer you to a real estate attorney. There is a website called CEDA, which you can purchase a report, and they will do a full assessment of the HOA documents that you have. And then lastly, if your employer, and I never get the name of this right, but it's like you have legal...
Prepaid legal.
Thank you. Yep. Prepaid legal through your employer. Your prepaid legal will also review those documents for you as well. And that you've already paid for. So that wouldn't cost you anything. Yeah. A real estate attorney, obviously, you'd have to pay for their time. And then CEDA also has a charge to it. But I think the CEDA is somewhere around $500. And well worth it
Absolutely.
to understand what you're getting into and
Absolutely.
analyze those HOA documents. So just a little HOA tip for buyers out there. And
so our goal always is to provide you with, obviously, talk about information.
Yep.
Hopefully we're adding value.
Yes.
You're learning some things, but we'd also like to hear, is there anything you want to hear about? Is there,
Absolutely.
let us know, DM us, reach out.
Call, text, email, DM us, comment. However you can get us that information on what you want to hear, we would love to be able to talk about that and address any questions that you have. So as usual, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching our podcast today, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on our social media.
Have questions about the real estate market? Send us an email at askgilegroup@gilegroup.com, or give us a call or shoot us a text.